Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to NBAV, the NBA Avenue podcast. And we're going to start off with the hotter news, which is that the Warriors seem like they're going to be bringing in not just Slow-Mo, not just D'Anthony Melton, but they're also seeming like they're about to bring in Buddy Hield. And what this does is it sets up a super interesting narrative, because if Buddy Hield does amazingly well alongside Steph Curry and just steps in, and it's Steph Curry, Buddy Hield, and D'Anthony Melton, it's just going to look really, really, really bad for Klay Thompson. Because if you're able to bring in a career journeyman up to this point, Buddy Hield, a guy who is sort of feast or famine, and really nowhere near the caliber of player, not even in the same ballpark, not even in the same league as a Klay Thompson, and he just steps in there and does swimmingly well, then it's going to look like the Warriors are geniuses for letting Thompson go, and it's going to look bad for Thompson, and people are going to say, well, hey, there's many guys in the league who could have played alongside Steph and been a splash brother. And if you look all the way on the other end, if the Warriors flame out, which they certainly can do, it's going to look like, whoa, the Warriors should not have let Klay Thompson go. They should have paid him, and they should have rode out that core as far as they possibly could have taken it. And if Klay is playing well on the Mavericks in his new role, and he's hitting open threes, and the Mavericks are a top 3 seed in the West, it's going to look really good for Klay, really bad for the Warriors. There's just so many ways that this can go, and the Warriors are really pronouncing it. They're really putting salt on it, where it's going to amplify the flavor, and you're going to really see, you're really, really going to see whether or not this is going to be something which is lauded, or whether letting go of Klay Thompson is going to be something which is a massive regret. Because by bringing in a guy like Buddy Hield, by bringing in someone who is a sort of feast or famine player, that's really going to amplify the nature of a move like this. Then there's more parts of the Warriors which it seems like it's hard to understand. I don't know what the Warriors are thinking bringing in a guy like Slow-Mo. The Warriors over the years have had a lot of signings who have been, oh, that seems like a smart signing. Like this past year, they brought in Dario Saric. It didn't end up being a very smart signing for them. He didn't really end up playing too much for them. The Warriors brought in Dante DiVincenzo, and he was kind of okay, and he didn't stick around for too long, and then he ended up becoming a much better player on the New York Knicks. The Warriors had a guy like Jonas Jerebko, who seemed like, NBA player. It could be good on the Warriors. Didn't really work out. Sort of the guys in the mid-tier, with the guys who, Dante wasn't quite as bad, but Jerebko, Saric, guys who are sort of playing in that three-point line and they're not stepping beyond the three-point line, they don't really fit in too well. Even a player like Draymond Green, who's not known for his shooting at all, does step beyond the three-point line, and in the finals, in playoff games, whenever they need it, he comes up with a big three at the end of a ball game, or he comes up with a dagger when you would least expect it, and it's the threat of the three, or getting all the way to the basket, or dishing the ball to a teammate cutting baseline that makes Draymond Green a great threat. So the question is, are the Warriors doing the right thing by bringing in a guy like Slow-Mo? Now, Melton, we can quibble with the price. He's making almost $13 million for the year, which is a lot of money for a guy like Melton, who had some back issues last season. Now, if he's healthy and it turns out to work out really well, and he goes and he becomes a $15 million player, then you'll say, hey, the Warriors made a great move. They swung big by bringing in Melton. But there were a lot of other guys out there. I mean, there's still the Heat player, Caleb Martin, is still out there. You could have taken a shot on him. You could take a shot still on Gary Trent, who's out there, who is a very good three-point shooter, and it's mind-boggling that nobody has signed him up to this point. He is a guy who's perfect for this NBA right now, in the here and now in the NBA. The Warriors could bring in Tyus Jones and have a great backup point guard, but I guess they're not going to do that because they trust in Pajemski. But Gary Trent is just a guy who's primed and ready to go in today's NBA. You have a guy like Lonnie Walker, who's sitting out there just waiting for a team to sign him. And Lonnie Walker is a guy who played for the Nets this past season. He's athletic. And he had playoff moments when he was a member of the Lakers just a couple of years ago. He basically won a playoff game I think it was like game 6 against the Warriors. Lonnie Walker was unbelievable. I don't know how you're a Warriors fan and you're not sitting there going, why are you not signing Lonnie Walker? Every team in the league should want to sign Lonnie Walker. It's not going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a very minimal contract. The Lakers should want him back. Every team should want to sign Lonnie Walker right now. You have Precious Achiuwa sitting out there. The Knicks, I'm sure, are trying to bring him back desperately, and other teams should as well. There are very few good big men that you can sign on the free agent market, and there are very few good big men that are available for trade. So you would think that he'd be a guy that someone would really want to bring in. And it seems like we've just ventured into talking about which free agents are available, so we can keep that going. You have Markelle Fultz. Probably not really worth too much of a look considering he gets injured a lot. And even when he's on the court, he's only okay. You can only bring him in as a flyer, as a backup point guard. You can't really bring him in any serious capacity. You have Moses Brown out there. Moses Brown is a guy who, as a big man, in a market that there's not a lot of big men, I would love to bring him in if I'm a Knick and you're looking for a big man right now. If I'm any team who's looking for a big man, you would want to try out Moses Brown for a small salary. Taurean Prince just got signed. Prince got signed to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks have brought in so far only a couple of players. They brought in DeLon Wright and they brought in Taurean Prince. That's really not going to cut it. If you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan, they would kind of need to do a little bit more. I know there were talks about Brook Lopez, but let's face it. Trading Brook Lopez isn't going to bring you very much in return at this point because Brook Lopez is just getting older. What is he, 36? He's at least 35. I mean, he's not going to get you too far. So I would say at this point you're stuck holding on to him and letting that expire. Or maybe if your team falls out of it, you trade him away at the deadline. You have Mikhailuk out there. He's a guy who can shoot threes. You have Horton Tucker out there. Not really sure what his role is in today's NBA. You have Fontecchio out there. He's a body. You have Tice out there, backup center. You have a guy like Reggie Bullock who could shoot threes, I guess. I don't know. I might move him down into that bottom tier of available free agents. You have Luke Kennard, who can potentially go to another team. You have Cody Zeller, right? A big man. I don't know. Is he still in the league? Is he not? Chetty Osman's out there. He can bring energy to a bench unit. Justin Holiday. Dinwiddie. A deep bench guy, but maybe coming up to more of the end of his NBA career. You have Cam Payne. I know he was arrested in Phoenix recently, but he's a guy who, on Philadelphia this past season, there were moments where he would come in when Tyrese Maxey didn't have it and Joel Embiid was out with injury. And Cam Payne would just come in and hit a couple of three-pointers, and it was like the only place on the entire court that offense was going to come from was going to be from Cam Payne. So if you are looking for a backup point guard, you should get in the Payne business. Cameron Payne is a guy who has played for a lot of good teams. He played for Philly this past year, got playoff experience. He played for Phoenix, got playoff experience. He seems to be in the playoffs everywhere he goes, and he's a player that a lot of teams should be interested in. Alec Burks got signed to the Heat, a great signing there. One thing that Alec Burks will do is, in big moments, he's going to play his heart out. Whether you have players available, whether he's brought in off the bench because of injury like this past season on the Knicks, he really plays his tail off. And he earned a lot of respect from me watching him play in those games where the Knicks really didn't have much to go off of. They were kind of down to their last breath, and he went out as you would want someone to go out on their last breath. He really, really played hard. Oladipo's out there. Not sure what he's worth at this point. You have Okoro. Looks like Buddy Hield is going to the Warriors. And you have Haywood Highsmith. The Heat are still really working to retain him. Those are really the guys. Yeah, Kyle Lowry's out there. If you want to take a flyer on Pokashevsky, he's out there. Dario Saric is trying to rehabilitate his image in the Olympics right now, or whatever they are calling what's happening right now. Then you have like Marcus Morris is out there. He's out there. Dennis Smith Jr., you could go try to bring him in. Robert Covington is out there for whatever that's worth. Kevin Knox is going to play for the Warriors in Summer League. Gallo is out there, for a bargain, bottom of the bench type of thing. If you want to take a flyer on Killian Hayes, hey, he's there. You go get him. You can give it a try. If you are desperate, give Gordon Hayward a call. Give Pat Bev a call. See what they can bring to your team. Jordan McLaughlin is a guy who's on the free agency right now. Ish Smith is out there. These are sort of more of the bargain type players down there at the bottom. But, they're players that you can use to fill out your roster if you're desperate. And if you look and you say which teams have made the most signings, just to try and give sort of a feel to free agency, and you can try to figure out, well, who really knew what they were doing coming in? Who had a clear, concerted game plan of which players they wanted to go after? The Orlando Magic have made the most signings. But it's 4 of their 5. They have 5 total signings. They're leading the league. And I'm not including guys who have never played in the league before. I'm not including rookies coming into the league who were just drafted. But Orlando brought in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They swiped him from the Nuggets, and that's really been their big move. And then other than that, they offered Jonathan Isaac a 5-year deal. They brought back Mo Wagner for another couple of years. They brought back Goga Bitadze, probably overpaid him. And they even brought back Gary Harris. Orlando has a strategy of, we're trying to keep our players playing together. And in an NBA where players bounce around the league now more than they ever have, it's a viable strategy. For Orlando to come in and say, hey, we value sticking together for many years and building chemistry, that's an interesting way to look at the NBA landscape today. And they're doing something that certainly most other teams are not doing. So you might look at it and say, well, hey, Jonathan Isaac wasn't that great. I know he brings good defense, but he misses a lot of time. And Mo Wagner, yeah, you would want to keep him. Goga Bitadze didn't play a lot in the second half of the year. Gary Harris, not a very good player. But they bring back all these guys, and they're trying to keep continuity. Now, they haven't brought back Markelle Fultz, but hey, some players you got to let go. And I would say I wouldn't have kept Gary Harris if I was Orlando. I don't think that was smart. I wouldn't have necessarily kept Bitadze if I were them. And I would have had a long, hard look at Jonathan Isaac as well. Definitely not sure that I would have offered him the contract that they did. They offered him $84 for 5 years. That's almost $17 million a year. I don't know if I would have given him that much money. And certainly I wouldn't have gone for Harris. I wouldn't have given Bitadze as much money as he got. Right? He got $25 million for 3 seasons. That's over $8 million a year. I don't think he's really worth quite as much as they're paying. But they are putting value on continuity and playing with the same teammates year after year and building chemistry, which is interesting, especially when you have one of the best young players in the game in Paolo Banchero. So I can respect what they're doing. There are 2 other teams in the league who signed 4 guys. One are the Philly 76ers, and they did it because they had to. They had virtually nobody left on the roster. The only 2 guys who were technically on the roster were Embiid and Paul Reed. So yeah, they had to bring in some guys. They signed Paul George. They signed Tyrese Maxey to his max contract. They brought back Oubre, and they brought Drummond, who's been in Philly before. So they kind of brought in 4 guys, which is a lot, but they really had no choice. And they're looking for more guys because they have to. And the Phoenix Suns also brought in 4 guys. They brought back Royce O'Neal. They really overpaid him. They brought in Mason Plumlee, who's not going to help them very much, but maybe it gives them a way to get rid of Nurkic and save some salary to try and sign someone else. Then they have Monty Morris, who's kind of a chance, a prayer, hoping that he's able to go back to his self of a few years ago and play a lot better than the value of the contract, make it a good value. And then you have Damian Lee, who just kind of like, yeah, we'll bring him back. He's on the fringes, and it is what it is. But the Suns didn't do anything that's going to really improve them going into next season. And then there are teams that signed 3 guys. The Celtics brought back Tatum. Well, they really brought back more because Cornette, I didn't even have on this list, but they brought back Tatum, White, Tillman, Cornette as well. And then there are other teams that also brought back 3 guys. Right? Like we have the Raptors. They signed Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, and they also brought back Garrett Temple. Not sure what the Raptors' vision is, and not sure how they'll be able to win in the future moving forward in the NBA. You have the Pacers. They re-signed Siakam, they re-signed Toppin, and they brought in James Wiseman, a guy who's just going to blend in well into the background. A very good place for Wiseman to go, considering He was under a lot of spotlight ever since he's been drafted as a part of the Warriors. And then he went over to Detroit, but now he's in a place that really is about as inconspicuous as you can be in the NBA, which is Indiana. Who's really paying attention to you out there? There's a lot of other big men in front of you. There's Turner, there's Toppin. They let Jalen Smith go, but they have a lot of big men. And it's a good place where Wiseman can just blend into the background and try and get himself going in the NBA. The Clippers signed a bunch of guys. The Clippers signed James Harden to the 2-year, $70 million deal. They signed Nick Batum back. They brought Chris Dunn in. They brought back Kevin Porter Jr., who some people think shouldn't be allowed back, but it is what it is. On the court, he's a pretty good player. And the Clippers are the kind of franchise where I think if they would have had things go right for them, if Kawhi would have been able to play as much as you needed him to, I think things would have worked out a lot differently for them. And that's not saying very much, but what I'm saying is the Clippers go out and they make moves. They sign guys. They need players. They know that Russell Westbrook wants to go somewhere else. It seems like they're going to trade him somewhere else, so they bring in guys to fill that role. They bring in Dunn. They bring in Kevin Porter. They know what they're to an extent. They know what they're doing. They know that they need stuff, and they go out and they get it. They're like, okay, they walk in with a shopping list, and they don't want to spend a lot of time in the store. They run in, their car's double parked. They grab the items that they need. They run out. Did they get the best version of every product? No, but they come out with a full basket. That's kind of the way the Clippers look at free agency. And if they would have had things go right for them at the top, and they would have ended up with, in their basket, a couple of those things really worked out, they would fill in the rest around it really well. But unfortunately, they can't seem to get those players at the top who they really needed. You can make a case they had it in SGA, and then they traded him away, but what can you do? They thought they were making the right move at the moment. And then you also have the Miami Heat. They brought back Kevin Love, they brought back Thomas Bryant, and now they brought in Alec Burks over from the Knicks, who we already discussed. And the Wolves, they brought in Luka Garza. They re-signed him. They brought Joe Ingles in. So he was one guy that the Orlando Magic couldn't hold on to. And then they signed P.J. Dozier back from overseas. He's back in the NBA. A really kind of out-of-the-blue random signing for them. But the Wolves know we are going to get the rest of our roster going by really finding guys from nowhere. And getting Ingles, frankly, is a pretty good move for them. They lost Kyle Anderson. They lost Slow-Mo. And bringing in Ingles is a pretty nice replacement, all things considered. They are spending a lot of money at the top. And it's going to be very hard for them to keep building around that, right? They have Gobert and Towns and Anthony Edwards. It's going to be hard for them. They have Naz Reid, who's going to, demand more money sooner rather than later. And Karl Anthony Towns is going to be making over $60 million soon. And you know that money for Edwards is going to be enormous. So they're doing what they can. Garza, Joe Ingles, P.J. Dozier. That's what they're looking at. And the Lakers basically so far haven't done anything. They just have LeBron and Max Christie. Christie's just going to turn into a salary dump. He's going to turn into a guy who gets shipped out to add salary to a trade because the contract they gave him is ridiculous. The Cavaliers haven't done anything outside of re-signing, extending Donovan Mitchell. The Thunder made one signing, but they also made a trade. So they brought Hartenstein. They also got Caruso. The Pistons, they brought Tobias Harris in, but he's coming back. He likes it in Detroit. And I can see why, because he's not good on the big stage. Tobias Harris is a great Detroit Piston. He belongs there. Contrast him with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who started off his career in Detroit, played there for a bunch of seasons, was kind of their prized possession. Eventually, he went over to the Lakers, and he ended up winning a title. He was there before LeBron was there. He was there when the Lakers were building this young, cool roster. Alex Caruso was on that team. And then Caruso, not Caruso, I'm sorry. Alex Caruso was on that team. Caruso ended up not sticking around, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope also ended up not sticking around, and now LeBron is still there with AD. But Caldwell Pope ended up winning a chip, not just in LA, but he then won a chip in Denver, and now he's going to try and see if he can go with the Magic to make a conference finals. Very different. Caldwell Pope was in Detroit, and he's like, I want to get out of here. I want to play in big games, and he did. Tobias Harris left Detroit, played in big games, and he's like, I want to go back to Detroit. The Nets just retained Claxton. The Kings did a good job bringing back Malik Monk and Alex Len, two guys they could have easily lost. They lost Davion Mitchell. I don't know why. I don't know why they got rid of him. They lost Vezenkov. I don't know why. He seemed like he was a good shooter when he got to play. The Bulls, a mystifying signing of Patrick Williams, and then they stole Jalen Smith from the Pacers to a good deal, $27 million for 3 years. He's a player. He's an athletic body. An upgrade over Andre Drummond, who went to the Sixers. Didn't lose anything there. The Mavs got Najee Marshall. They got Klay Thompson. Very intriguing stuff happening there. The Wizards are amassing the random big men of the NBA, Rashawn Holmes and Jonas Valanciunas. And it's pretty silly considering how much money they're paying those guys when they don't have a very good team. But when it comes down to it, there are teams that are looking for big men. And later in the year, they could flip Rashawn Holmes to a team who needs him. They could flip Valanciunas to a team who needs a big man. So it's actually not the stupidest thing the Wizards have ever done, stocking up on big men, because it may pan out in their favor. It's kind of like doing your fantasy football draft. I know fantasy basketball is not too much of a thing. I guess there are still people who play it, but you're doing your fantasy football draft and you take that extra quarterback thinking, hey, this guy's going to be really good. If he starts running and we get halfway into the year, someone might want him. Well, it might be the same thing for Rashawn Holmes and Valanciunas over on the Wizards. The Spurs pretty much just brought in CP3, a good move for them like we discussed. The Jazz brought in Eubanks, and we're waiting on a Lauri Markkanen trade. We're waiting to see what happens, but I don't think Danny Ainge is pressed to make a decision. I think he's putting the feelers out there, and if someone blows his socks off, yeah, he's going to make the move, but otherwise, he's content to wait. He's done it before. He's done it many times before, and as of now, as of nearly 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, there's still no deal for Lauri Markkanen. Who knows if there will be? The Rockets retained Aaron Holiday, good move. The Nuggets haven't really done anything. People are panicking over in Denver, and for good reason, because there are talks about them getting Russell Westbrook from the Clippers, and the guy they really need is James Harden. They need the guy who is the great passer, the great assist maker, the guy who can score. If you put, it's so ironic. The best role James Harden ever had was the six-man role, which he was on the Thunder. And the reason why he got traded from the Thunder is that they felt he was a guy they didn't need to hold on to. And it was a big mistake. Presti will admit to it. You could have had Harden, Westbrook, and Durant in their primes for 3-4 more seasons, rather than the way it worked out with him going elsewhere. But James Harden in that six-man role was really the best role for him, because he, as a franchise guy, he's never been able to take his game to the next level. He's never been able to, outside of the lobs, he's never been able to get the rest of his team involved. He's never been able to come up big at the end of important games. But he's that microwave scorer, that six-man. In that role, he's unbelievable. Problem is, his skill set is so good that he commands too much money, and you can't afford a six-man like that. He's exceeded past, his skill set brings him beyond the point of Norman Powell, and he just ends up being this guy who commands so much money that you basically have to treat him like your first or second best player. But truthfully, if he was on the Nuggets, if he could make his way over to the Nuggets in some sort of trade where Michael Porter Jr. ends up going to the Clippers, and now you have the Denver Nuggets with Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and then the backup point guard coming off the bench is Harden, that would be unbelievable. Now, I know it sounds silly that I'm saying a trade that's not really going to happen, but I'm doing it to put emphasis on the fact that in Denver, it's nice to have Michael Porter Jr., who's a microwave scorer, a guy who could get really hot, but the most important position outside of Jokic and Murray for them is the backup point guard. Because Jokic is consistent. He plays every game. He doesn't get hurt. But Murray gets hurt all the time. He misses a lot of games every year. Some seasons he misses the whole season. He was injured this past playoffs. He looked like he was going to go down completely, and he ended up somehow making it back and nearly emerging from that Wolves series. He was doing a lot of it on one leg. For that reason, because Jamal Murray misses time and often isn't on the court and needs a guy who can back him up, that backup point guard is massive for them. They need a good backup point guard. If they would have been able to bring in CP3, that would be big for them. If they could bring in Tyus Jones, that would be enormous, tremendous for them. So for them, it's more important for them to have a good backup point guard than it is for them to have a good wing scorer like Michael Porter Jr., who's streaky. And they already lost Caldwell Pope, so their fans are panicking. And then we discussed the Bucks. They haven't done enough. The Bucks have not done enough. And what we're really waiting on is the Jazz to make a trade, and we're waiting on the Pelicans, because the Pelicans got DeJounte Murray over from the Hawks. Who knows what the heck the Hawks are planning? The Hawks said, hey, DeJounte Murray is not as important to this city as Trae Young. They're holding on to Trae Young. He's valuable for them. They have another valuable guy if they want to make a fire sale. Bogdan Bogdanović. He's one of the most valuable guys in the league with the way the game was played today. A sharpshooter like him. And that's where it is right now. We're waiting. We're waiting on the Pelicans to make another move. They brought in DeJounte Murray. Now what's going to happen next? They sent out Larry Nance. But they still have McCollum. They still have Ingram. Now they have DeJounte Murray and they have Zion. What are they going to do? Doesn't look like any new moves have happened, so we're going to finish things out. We'll be back shortly to talk any important news here with you on the daily in the NBA offseason. Like always, we're your source for a great time every time, and until next time, we are out.